I don't think this video is going to be for everyone, and I also think that this is a video that I'm hoping might just not be the right time for you if it doesn't resonate. And I think one of the things I get asked a lot is, how do I get started? How do I be successful? Why are other people having success and not me? And at the same time, having a mentorship and helping a lot of people who I consider friends, trying to help them get their career going. I've seen some people have major success, and it's so inspiring for me to see their growth, their success, and it makes me want to put more into what I do. At the same time, there's a lot of people who, unless something changes, they're not going to reach that success ever, and it's them. It's not the city or the country they live in. It's not that they're not smart enough or whatever excuses that we make to prevent us from having to try. It's simply a lot of us are not willing to put in the work to make it happen. Or we're willing to put in time and work into something, but we're never actually willing to actually think about what we're doing. We're just acting as a blunt instrument. In other words, while I'm doing all the tutorials, why am I not getting a job? We're not looking at, well, what do I really need to change? I had a discussion with my fiance recently about swimming, and she was saying how at the time she never thought that she could do anything better to get faster. In other words, she was as good as she was going to get, and it's not until later that she realized she could have been better. And I think that a lot of us weigh ourselves down by really setting the bar low. In other words, if we're in a swimming pool, and this is my analogy or my take on it, but if we're in a swimming pool and we look left and right, because that's how she was describing it, that you would look to the left and you look to the right, like you're in your own race, but you're still looking to see how well you're doing. And when I hear her say that, it makes me think, well, what if you look left and right and you know that you're beating everyone else? Then what's your motivation to try harder? Because I think a lot of us, we might have our friends, and out of our friends, we're having that little bit of a success, and it's making us feel like, good job, I'm doing better than everyone else. So, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing. I can stop trying now. And I think that is the most poisonous thing that we can do, is to think that in our circle we're the best. We got enough people complimenting us and telling us how great we are that we don't need to strive to be better. And it's very easy to find people who are like-minded. So in other words, if you're not doing great, it's very easy to find people who are not doing as great as you to make yourself feel better about yourself. And it's this downward poisonous spiral where you're setting the bar lower and lower and lower, so that way you can feel better, better, and better. Instead, I always think that I want to be the less knowledgeable person in the room. I want to be around people who make me feel like an idiot, in the sense that they're doing so much more, they're thinking so much more, because it'll inspire me to do better. So when I think of that swimming pool, it makes me think, if I'm looking around and I don't see anyone else because I'm clearly winning, it makes me think I gotta find a new swimming pool. I gotta find new competitors. I want to be the person who is dragging ass, like I'm behind everyone else in the race, because that's going to make me want to think, how can I make myself better? How can I push myself further? What can I do to catch up? How do I get to a point where I'm on par with them? How do I get past them where I'm at a point where I got to find another pool, another set of competitors, and level up and level up? And I think for a lot of us, we don't have that, where we're set in our ways. And it went to another discussion where we're talking about her being from a small town and not really knowing what was possible. And I think that, again, we tend to mirror the other people around us. So if all of us, our goals are just to get a stable job and to have a family and really kind of set average things, like there's nothing wrong with having that sort of lifestyle. But when you want secretly to be above average, when you want to do more, when you know that you're capable of doing more, that's where it's frustrating, is not knowing that it is possible to do all that, but you need to probably leave that normal circle first. So you stop mirroring them and seeing that as the acceptable level to be at. If you start to be around people who are at a much higher level, it's going to open your mind to it. It's going to make you feel more inspired. Most people, I think, get so frustrated with their careers and with their goals because they're not really setting goals. They're not really executing on them. I think a lot of us go to college or set up I'm going to work 6 months on my demo reel, because this is giving us this big comfort barrier where we don't need to ever actually go out there and succeed. You know, if I've set a goal for 6 months when really it should have been 6 weeks, it means that I've got an entire half year to try and find another excuse never to actually get out there in case I feel rejected or I don't make it or whatever it might be. So we're prolonging that failure, when that failure, if that is to come, is going to be a check mark in our big milestones that we want to hit. So the more failures we get, the more we can start to fine tune. Again, it's about if I'm slower than everyone else in that race, how do I speed up? How do I get further and be able to beat everyone? Clearly, I need to make changes. Whatever I'm doing isn't working. And it's the same thing with that. You know, if I'm receiving failures, if I'm applying for jobs, if I'm trying to learn something and I'm failing, clearly I got to change, I got to make changes to get to my desired result. Whereas most of us don't. Instead, we set really low expectations, like that 6-month goal or whatever it might be. I'll go to college for 4 years and maybe I'll do this. Prevent myself from going out into the real world because the real world might be scary. And I always say attack with urgency and fail fast, because exactly that. If I set goals that are so intense that I need to get results within a certain amount of time, it means that I can see that I'm getting positive results very quickly, because in a condensed timeline, there's no way around it. You need to be hitting the mark every single day. And that's where failing fast comes in. If I'm not failing, if I'm not making it, if I am failing, I'll identify it very quickly. If you've got a 6-month goal to make your demo reel, whatever the thing might be, it's a whole different game. You're gonna have a very relaxed period. You know, you're not gonna have to worry about things as much. The pressure isn't on you. But when you have that condensed timeline and high expectations, you can instantly see where you're failing. And it's good because you're reaching that failure much quicker, and you can try again. You can revise your plan, you can revise what you're doing until you figure out something that is working. And whether it's applying for a job, or whether it's applying for an internship, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, make a short film, whatever it is, the quicker you can see those results, positive or negative, the quicker you can iterate and change your plan until you get onto something that's working, and then you can double down. And that's the biggest thing that a lot of us are afraid of, is the failure, because we're afraid that our friends might make fun of us, our family might make fun of us, or we're gonna feel lousy inside. And if anything, I'm too busy focusing on the bigger picture to worry about my feelings when it comes to failure or rejection. I know that that's part of the process, and I think that maybe because I'm willing to acknowledge that, it allows me to not worry about having the self-pity party, and instead focus on the big picture. Again, attack with urgency and fail fast. I'm gonna fail fast over and over and over until I don't. So we think of Edison creating all the light bulbs that he did until he finally got to a point where he had a solution. And it's not that he was a failure every single day, it's simply that didn't work. Now I know I can check it off as one more way that this doesn't reach my entire goal. But either way, we're setting ourselves up for the big win. And I think that's a really critical thing. I frustrate a lot of people when I say it, but I always say that the only person holding you back is you. I think it's so true that we've got infinite capabilities. You know, there are people who handed everything on a silver spoon, but most of us aren't. Most of us don't have all those privileges, but a lot of us still get that success. And usually what it comes down to is hard work, determination, constant failure, and willing to get up and continue to retry. Most of us, we reach that failure and we say, okay, well, time to try something else. Or as soon as we find something to be difficult, we just give up and think there's got to be an easier way, instead of pushing through those barriers and making it happen. And I think that's the other thing about this, is realizing that it's going to be hard, and that's part of the process. If you're going to learn something, if you're going to learn and acquire a new skill, you need to acknowledge that for you to feel proud about learning that new thing, you're going to need to put in the work. You're going to have to overcome obstacles to get to where you're going. Okay? I always say that nothing worth doing is easy, and it's because I want to look back at what resistance I went through when I was trying to do something, and how hard it was to do it. But when I got there, it felt so much more greater knowing that I can look back and I'm never going to have that resistance again because I overcame it. And on top of that, I acquired a new skill, another one that I can add to the infinite amount of skills that I want to acquire over my lifetime. But if we get to that resistance and we think, no, there's got to be an easier way, we're going to have all of these failed attempts where we got 10%, 20% of the way there, and we're like, no, I faced resistance and I gave up and I put that in my pile. So do I want this to be myself looking back at how much I accomplished and how hard it was to get there, but when I finally got there, how sweet and great it was to experience that? Or do I want to look at all of the projects I abandoned, all of the times I changed my mind? I've got friends that I love to death, but I know that their personality is one that they love to try new things. They're so scatterbrained, they're going to do one thing one day, the next day they're doing a completely different thing. And it gets to a point where when they tell me they're going to do something, I got to always question that. I always got to see, like, is this going to be the same a week from now? And when they make a public announcement, I'm going to make a YouTube channel, I'm going to do this, it's like, I have faith in them, but I also know that they need to break these patterns. And until they're willing to do that, you know, these are all the big portfolio of things they've abandoned is going to continue to grow. And I think that all of us need to always look at ourselves for the answers. We need to look at our habits and what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. And when we do abandon things all the time, we've got to realize, well, maybe it isn't that I give up so soon and I'm always constantly just giving up on everything. Maybe it's the fact that I should be more careful with what I commit to. In other words, have a reason behind what I'm doing in the first place, rather than saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. There's nothing wrong with being excited and motivated and wanting to do all this stuff. I've got goals that go for 10, 15 years from now, but I pick and choose my battles. I pick and choose what goes into my calendar every single day. I don't set myself up for failure by deciding that I'm going to have all of these things I'm going to do. I used to, but now I'm very careful to say, these are all the things I want to do, but these are the things I set out to accomplish today. And it means that at the end of the day, if I get everything done and I still have more time, I'm still hungry to go out there and do more, I can go and grab things from that vault of things that I want to do, of tasks that I want to accomplish, goals that I want to achieve. At that point, I already feel great that I've accomplished so much, and I'm going to feel great to go in and get more to put on my plate, rather than putting so much on my plate that I feel so overwhelmed. And even though maybe I got a week worth of work done in one day, I'm still going to feel completely crushed and miserable because I only got 5% of the work that I set out to do that day done. In other words, I'm setting myself up for failure. And I think a lot of the time that's what we do. We tend to want to do so much and we don't know where to start. And everything that we do barely moves the needle. Instead of saying, well, look, if I want to do something, why am I doing it? What motivates me? What's the outcome look like? How am I going to get there? Do I have a plan in place? All of the things that are required for me to actually make it happen. So for me, I always think that anything that we set out to do is achievable, and I don't want to sound woo-woo about this, but goals for me, it's like if you don't have a goal, you don't have a direction. If you don't have a direction, you literally could be working away from the goal that you're trying to do. I always think of an analogy I came up with, which was swimming towards land, because it's so easy to lose your bearings. I know me, I'm not a swimmer, unlike my fiance, and if I close my eyes while I'm swimming, I'll open them again and realize I'm going off sideways. And that's just it. If I'm looking and desperately trying to swim towards land and I don't have that direction, I don't have those goals, it's very easy that I could be swimming away to my certain death because I'm not paying attention to where I need to be focused on. Goals are everything, and I think that that's so critical for us to realize that for us to focus on moving forward, we need to have a goal in mind. We need to have a focal point with everything that we're doing. If we don't have that every single day, then we are setting ourselves up for failure. If I set out with a goal of accomplishing anything, I think it's all achievable. We literally just need to figure out what it is. I think that's honestly the hardest thing to do. I remember I quit high school in grade 9. I was barely even grade 9. It was the second week. I got into a really big fight, and I decided I better lay low for a little bit. And that little bit ended up being weeks, months, until it's like, I'm gonna repeat next year. I just never went back. But something happened with that, which was I came from a small town and I had so many family members pointing out the people who dropped out of high school, and that person's a loser, he dropped out of high school. That always resonated with me, that I don't want to be a loser, I better make something of myself. If I'm not going to go to school, then I better do something about it. I better make something of myself. So it was very easy for me to decide that I wanted to do video games, or I wanted to do art. Like for me, I had passions that I was interested in. It didn't really correlate with how that's going to equal money or a career or anything just yet, but it meant that I had a path, I had interests, things that would drive me. So it became very easy to magnate towards the things I'm passionate about. And I was fortunate enough not to have people telling me too much that I'm going to fail, until I started to really realize what I wanted to do, and I started to communicate that to everyone else. I started to say, I'm going to work in Hollywood doing movies and visual effects. And as soon as I started to communicate that, that's when everyone started to tell me their opinions, their fears, their own insecurities about how they never accomplished what they wanted to do. And the way they communicated that was that you'll never amount to anything. You'll never do that. You're going to fail. Pick a real career. Do all the things that I do. Go back to school. Be stable. Be realistic. Be grounded in what you're doing. And if I were to have listened to all those people, I have no idea where I would be right now. I would have no idea what I'd be doing. I know I'd be in Australia, probably doing something quite boring, quite average, quite not fulfilling for what I want to do. Instead, I was smart enough, I think, to ignore everyone, but smart enough also to have a goal and know how to approach it the right way. For me, I think that all of us can do anything we set out to do, but it's more important that we have that clear goal. And all my friends, after I had been working and traveling and having a lot of success as a teenager in my career, I was still in contact with everyone from high school, and I'd be asking them when they're 17, like, what do you want to do now that you're graduating from high school? And no one had the faintest idea. I think it's the hardest thing for us to really open up about, even to ourselves, is what do I really want to do? What am I inspired by? Most of us think that we're going to be judged, or most of us think that it's not attainable to do what we set out to do. For me, setting a goal when there was no internet, I was 14 years old, I knew nothing, and what I wanted to do was work in Hollywood movies like every other person has that unrealistic, unattainable goal, or so we're told, that they want to go out and do all these great things. For me, that was so unrealistic that I could ever accomplish that, but it didn't stop me. Instead, what I did is I said, okay, well, my goal is all the way out there, and I've set that goal, and now I'm here. Let's look at what I got, what I can leverage. Do I have any experience? Do I have any skill? Do I have any of these things? No, I don't have any of these things at all. The one thing I do have is passion. That's something I can use, but nothing else. I'm literally starting from scratch. I'm a little kid. There's no internet. The world isn't as small as it is now. Back then, talking about America was like a myth. It wasn't a real place. It was something that you would see on TV. Talking about Hollywood and movies and all of these things. All of it was so unattainable, so unrealistic, that I would get laughed at, even by my closest, most caring friends, if I were to ever communicate that. I would have friends constantly giving me talks about how I gotta cool it with that stuff, because I'd always be so amped up and so excited about my dreams, my aspirations, like what I'm doing that day to work towards my goals. And unfortunately, it did make me learn to shut up. It did make me start to think, well, maybe I should be a little bit more down to earth. But secretly, inside, I'm working till 6 in the morning, 10 in the morning, every single day, trying to work towards my goal. I'm constantly doing all these things that I couldn't even communicate to my friends, like to people I meet, because they're teenagers. They're dealing with working at McDonald's. I'm dealing with working for Disney. I'm dealing with doing all this travel. I'm lecturing at university when I was 17 years old. The goals that I set out were very different to everyone else, and because of that, I would alienate myself if I were to ever communicate that to those people. So it was a lot easier for me to have two lives, one that I'm vocal about and one that I'm really doing, behind the scenes. But the biggest thing, the most critical thing that I could have ever done was set a goal. It sounds so silly and remedial and so unimpactful to simply be able to say, well, I want to do this, but you're already ahead of everyone else because you have that direction. And by knowing where you are and what you already have, even if it is nothing, at least then you have that origin point. Like, I am here. And it means, okay, well, if I have nothing and I've got to acquire all of that, well, how do I do that? Instead of working forwards, I'd work backwards. I'd work on, okay, well, if I want to work in Hollywood, well, what do I need to do that? If it was possible, what would that look like? Because so many people would say that's impossible. I'd say, well, if it was possible, what would it look like? And I would break that down. I would simply start to say, well, and knowing what I know now, a lot of the stuff I probably didn't need, but I would need a formal education. I would need to have contacts in the industry. I would need to have friends and a network. I would need to have skills to be able to do it, because I definitely didn't have any skills. I didn't know how to do any of this yet. I definitely didn't know anyone. I was a 14-year-old kid, and no one even knew what 3D animation or any of this stuff was. Toy Story literally had just come out. So what did I do? I had none of these things, but at least then I had that next set of goals. If I had the piece of paper and all these things, then maybe that will work to the next step. Maybe I can get my first job. The more I broke it down, the more it looked like the most complicated insane journey that's forked in different directions is not like a linear path, because I'm doing all these things at once. I need a portfolio to prove that I can do what I do. All of these different things. I need a work permit. How do I get that? It originally started as a myth, and suddenly I had a plan in front of me that looked like a lot of work. It looked very complicated. It looked overwhelming, and it looked scary. But the difference is, a minute ago, none of this was attainable. Now, this is going to be the next few years of my life. This is going to be the next few years of my life that I'm going to be devoting to making this dream come true. And the more I broke it down, the more steps would be created, but the more it would become attainable. To the point where it is, gotta go to school. Okay, I'll start applying at colleges. And me being too young, I wasn't allowed to go to college. So what I did, I started saying, well, what if I did it online and I just paid extra to use the lab? And that was so valuable to me, was going out there and using a university computer lab where I had Pentium Pros with 200 megahertz, and maybe like 4 megabytes of RAM or whatever it was. I had computers that I could use that were fast. But on top of that, I was in a room of people who are all passionate about what I did. I was this 14-year-old punk kid, and I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to go up to someone and say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I did the best thing I could, which was I spent all my time there, and I did really cool stuff. And after a while, I would be doing stuff that would attract people. I'd purposely leave it on the screen and go to the bathroom and come back, and people would be crowded around my computer looking at my work. And I'd go and sit back down and I'd say, hi, I'm Alan. And this is how I'd begin to meet people and network and start to find other like-minded people. I didn't need to go to school to do it. I skipped all that and went straight into being in the environment where I can get a lot from it. And from there, I continued to work my portfolio. I worked my first demo reel, and that would hopefully land me my first job. Bit by bit, all of these things that I figured I need to do. If I want to work in Hollywood, well, I'm probably going to need 4 or 5 years experience working in the industry in Australia first. So let me get that going. For me to get a job there, well, I'm going to need to figure out where I want to apply, what kind of work they're doing, and try and mimic the same quality of work. So I'd be obsessed with certain game studios and film companies that I would like to work at, and I became obsessed sending in my reel after reel after reel, to the point where I get rejected, but eventually they knew who I was. I was that really annoying kid who was always applying, always bettering myself until I could get that first job. This was persistence, this was having a plan. And I think persistence is a key part of it. If you're not strategizing, if you're not constantly checking in. One of the things I look back at now that I would change is, if I send in 10 reels and I don't get a result, I gotta look at what I'm doing wrong, instead of just sending another 10, another 10, another 10, expecting a different result. We all know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. And that was me going insane, making my demo reel, working on it day and night, and then when it didn't work, I would send it to another place, another place, another place. After a while, I'd work on version 2, and then version 3. And for me, devoting all this time to making my reel, working on applying for jobs, getting rejected, having everyone telling me that I'm gonna fail and I should be more realistic, go back to school, all of the things echoing in my ear, it did get to the point where I was at a point where I was like, maybe everyone's right. Maybe I should just give up and go back to school and do something more realistic with my life. And I made that last reel, the last one, that if this doesn't get me a job, I'm just gonna give up. I'm just gonna say that everyone's right, and I'm gonna go back to school, and I'm gonna do something with my life, with my career. I'm gonna be doing something a bit more realistic. Unfortunately, I made that reel, I sent it in to all these places, and I started to get feedback. I wasn't getting job offers, but finally there was someone who I'd met, pure coincidence, on a project, like one of the few little things I had done, and he was working somewhere, and he saw my reel and he loved it. He said, let me put you in contact with this person. And that's where I got a job that changed my life. And from there, I got the momentum, and I started to work at that company, and I was learning so much in the first 2 weeks of being at that studio, just by being around other people who were passionate, who had been doing it for longer than me. And the more I was around them, I moved to a different city, moved to Sydney in Australia, and I eventually moved literally 3-minute bike ride from my work. So the minute the render farms weren't working, I was working on my own stuff. Weekends, I'd be in there working on my own animations. I was constantly growing, constantly learning. I was doing everything I could to level up my skills. I was going online, I was going to chat rooms, I was going to forums, I was doing everything I could to get to know everyone. I was making tutorials and helping other people and sharing and giving back as much as I could. I was obsessed with what I did, and by doing this, by living in that obsession, it meant I was bettering my skills and bettering my skills. Finally, it could get to a point where I could go to another company. I started getting job offers by all the places in Australia. Eventually took another job back in my home city, and I worked there for 2 years, and then I went back to Sydney. I was going to work on Happy Feet. Then coincidentally I went on High-End 3D, which is not around anymore, but it's like a Softimage and Maya news website, and I posted a random job application, just someone looking for effects people in LA, and I posted my work. This is my brand new reel. And I got a email saying, "Can we call you?" Which was followed by a phone call, which was followed by, "Next week, can you move to LA and work on our really big game cinematic?" And I moved to LA, and from there, I used the little bit of time that I had to network and meet more people and make most of the time that I had. Lunch breaks, I'm meeting with other studios. Nighttime, I'd be going out for drinks. I'd be contacting everyone who I'd met so far, who all lived in LA. Suddenly I was there. They all wanted to meet because I was this little kid in Australia. And the thing is, going to LA expecting like Hollywood, that pipe dream that I set out to do when I was 14 years old. Lunch breaks, I'm meeting with other studios. Nighttime, I'd be going out for drinks. I'd be contacting everyone who I'd met so far, who all lived in LA. Suddenly I was there. They all wanted to meet because I was this little kid in Australia. And the thing is, going to LA expecting like Hollywood, that pipe dream that I set out to do when I was 14 years old, and thinking that I would never even get there. Everyone telling me I never would. I would go into studios just to meet up with friends or whatever, and I introduce myself as Alan. And they'd say, "You know Alan McKay?" Everyone knew who I was. And for me, I'm still shocked. Same thing when I went to ILM, like people coming up to my table like, "Hey, we heard that you were coming here, like, so good to meet you." And to look back at where I was and to think like, how could I ever even be working in Los Angeles, especially back then when it was a lot harder to get work permits and do all of that, let alone like people already knew who I was. All I had done was do all this alone, do it all by myself, because I couldn't ever communicate to other people what I was doing, because I would alienate them. I'd sound like a crazy person saying that I want to do all these things, and then suddenly getting asked to work on Blade and all these other big movies and leveling up, and all it took was doing the work, being willing to fail, and more importantly, getting back up. Because I think that most of us, when we fail, we get that bit of rejection and we think, okay, I'm gonna try something else, instead of looking at, well, how can I turn this from a negative into a positive, and how can I keep moving forward? Most of us don't do that, and the more that we were to be smart about it and realize, well, failure is part of the process. If I want to learn to do something, I gotta learn from my mistakes. And this goes back to this conversation I had with my fiance about how in the beginning, you know, she always had a hard time as a competitive swimmer. She always had a tough time in the water, having to work so hard, and meanwhile deal with her personal life, which she didn't have the best upbringing. But meanwhile, if other people had it all handed to them on a silver spoon, and they had win after win after win, and all the right people supporting them. And what it came down to was the minute that they actually faced rejection, they lost a race for the first time ever, they would be in tears. They wouldn't know how to handle it. In other words, they've been so protected for so long and never experienced any failure that when they finally do, it cripples them. And I look at failure as part of what I'm going through. I think that in the beginning, you gotta eat shit, and the more that you do it, the more it's gonna toughen your skin for later. So I respect people more when they've done the hard yards. I've got friends who ask me for favors and handouts all the time, and I love them and I wanna help them, but I feel like I'm also doing them a disservice now by saying, great, I'll hire you to be on my team, even though you've never worked in this part of the industry before, because I know no one's gonna give you a break. I'll do that, and I've done that. But I feel like I'm doing them a disservice because they haven't proven themselves and faced all the learning that they need to do to get to that point where now they're getting a yes instead of a no. And I think that that's so critical for all of us to go through that, to toughen our skin, to realize what we need to change or how we need to do it to get the results that we're looking to get. So it's important, it's critical, it's so important for all of us to have the rejections and to realize when we're learning new software or whatever it is that we're running into, it's going to be hard, and the things that are worth doing don't come easy. I look at my whole career and what it took to get to where I was, and I look back at how hard it was and how brutal and unsure of myself I was for so long, but I realized that if anything, it just made what I set out to do that much sweeter when I finally got there. It made me feel that much more accomplished. If this was easy, if I were to just say one day I want to do computer animation and I want to work in movies, and then I just went and sent my resume in and got a job and here I am, I wouldn't be who I am and I wouldn't appreciate what I have. And it's everything that led up to there, every single turn. I was homeless at one point. I got fired and kicked out of the house that I lived in when I was 17 years old. I was living on the other side of the country, and I had a couple of days of not having a home, not having anything or money or anything, in any way to get home or anything. And that kind of stuff, like for some people, and even me now looking back, it probably isn't as bad as it could have been. That stuff really scarred me. It made me paranoid about ever being fired again, but it made me better because that was such a surprise when it happened. Completely my fault. I just wasn't doing the work. I was alienated trying to learn Softimage on an SGI for video games at a place I didn't really want to work for. All of these things. And meanwhile trying to find like a new apartment, and because I was staying on someone's couch, and everything the same day all happened at once, and it completely shell-shocked me, and it scarred me for easily half a year. I was having nightmares about being homeless and just living it out again and again and again. But it meant that I would never allow for that to happen ever again. It meant that every job since then, I would check in with my managers and ask how I'm doing, if there's anything I can do better. I didn't want it to be a surprise one day when they came over and put their hand on my shoulder and said, we need to talk. And then in the hallway, walking away saying, we're gonna let you go. And then when I finally got home that night, wondering what the hell I'm gonna do, and having all my suitcases all packed for me and being told, you gotta leave, we don't know where you're staying tonight, but this is it. And not having even my first paycheck at that point. And for me, it made me realize I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm never going to experience that again. And it meant that I would do everything I could to prevent that from ever happening again. The negatives become a positive because it made me always sure to check in with my bosses, with my job, with everything that was important to me to make sure I was doing well. I do that in my relationship. I'm always making sure that everything is good. Anything I can do that can be better. All of these things that most people look at as these negative things that we don't even want to deal with, a lot of the time we course correct and we're like, I don't want to deal with that. We just block it out every single time instead of thinking about it, dealing with it. And for me, it was more, this is a valuable lesson and how can I get a lot from it? Even my biggest failures, I look at, well, what can I do better? What can I have learned from this experience? My biggest wins. A lot of friends of mine think that I can be negative at times, and I'm not. I look at when I have these major wins and I should be out celebrating, I'm looking at, well, what could I have done better? How could I have done this better? What can I improve on? And I'm not doing it in a way that I'm telling myself you suck or you didn't accomplish much. I'm saying I did great and I'm happy with that, but what else can I do? How can I do this better next time? I'm always looking to improve and push and get further in my career. And I think that the more that we do this, it becomes second nature. It isn't something that we just get up and start doing right away. Instead, it's something that we work towards. We continue to get better with our career and all the goals that we set. Now, when it comes to everything, like I always think that our career is momentum and it's going to be resistance in the beginning. Just like if you had a car in the mud, it's going to be very hard to get it out, but the more you budget, the more it gains momentum until eventually you get it out and you get to roll down the hill and get back into motion again. And it's exactly with our career. I think that most of us don't realize that the hard yards are at the beginning, and it's natural selection. Most of us will give up in the beginning because we decide this is too hard, there's got to be something easier, and we go and do that. The ones that stick it through, and more importantly, the ones who are intelligent about it and realize, well, how can I do something better? what can I do to improve, setting those goals, accepting failure as part of the process. We're the ones who were able to finally get that success. And then the success becomes easier and easier and easier. Getting your foot in the door is one of the hardest things to do, but once you're in, you're in. And then from there, it's about bettering yourself until you're at a point where you're happy. I look at a lot of people who have a career where they complain about how many hours we're working and this isn't sustainable because they're 45 years old and doing this. And it makes me wonder, well, why are you still doing what you were doing 20 years before? You should have been elevating your career and stepping up and gaining traction. So that way when you are 20 years into your career, you're not sitting at a desk doing the same stuff that 20-year-olds are doing. Because everyone keeps saying that visual effects is a young man's game. And I think that if you're doing the work that others are doing at the beginning of their career still 20 years in, then you really weren't pushing yourself all this time. Everyone else who's gone on to supervise, to direct movies, to start their own companies and do all these different things, they're the ones who evolved and stepped up. So you're right, it might be a young man's game, but you don't want to be sitting at a desk doing all-nighters when you're 50 years old. That doesn't mean that this is a bad industry. It means that you've got to have a goal. You've got to have plans. You've got to check in with yourself and see, how am I doing? Is there anything I could be doing better? What else could I be doing to step up my career and move forward and make it more stable, to give myself more opportunities? If instead we're just blunt instrument going in and doing the same job and getting passed up for promotions and new opportunities because we're not even looking at that stuff. We're just focused on doing our thing and clocking in, clocking out. It is a young man's game when you're 40, 50 years old and you're still doing what they're doing. And that's exactly because of you. You're the only person holding yourself back. And this is where it's so critical with everything that we do to have those goals as we move through our career. I think we're so fortunate to be in creative industries where we get to be artists. We have the myth of the starving artist where we're set up for failure, that there's no money in art. And for us to prove that concept wrong and to be making all the money that we make, to have the freedom of what we do, to get to travel the world if that's something we wanted to do, to have the opportunity to work on things that everyone gets to see, and on top of that, be challenged every single day with what we're doing. And if we want to, we can move around. If we decided that we don't want to do effects anymore, we might want to do animation, or if we want to go produce a show or supervise or direct our own short film, we have so many opportunities to move around in an ecosystem while still being creative and work with other amazing people. Whereas most other careers, we don't have that. If we want to change and do something else, we got to start from scratch. This is such an amazing opportunity to do something great. If you want to make video games that inspire and make other people happy and get people talking about your stuff, if you want to make animation that makes people laugh, kids love it, people grow up on it and get influenced by it, whatever it is that you want to do, we're in this unique opportunity to do all of that. And I'm so happy and so grateful for that. And I look back at my life as a kid when I set the goal, I set the dream that I one day want to do all of this. And I said I want to work with people at Blur Studio, or I want to work at ILM, or I was obsessed with Doom. Getting to walk through the hallways of id Software and hang out with the guys who make Doom, or get to talk with the original team on that, or be on stage with John Carmack, or getting to walk the hallways of ILM and see all the amazing movie memorabilia. All the things in my career that I didn't even think would be possible. But I chose not to listen to myself. I chose not to listen to my friends. I chose to set goals and be smart about it, and to acknowledge it's going to be a lot of work, but it's not a myth anymore. I got that roadmap. I wrote it all out. Now I have my direction. I've got my vector. I've got my roadmap, my plan of what I need to do, and it's going to be all this hard work to accomplish it. But again, nothing worth doing is easy. Okay, I hope you found that valuable. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel right now. Just click the subscribe button. Also, something you're going to be interested in is I regularly put out a lot of free visual effects classes, guides, even on negotiating, and other valuable content that I only share with my subscribers. So head over to my website, alanmckay.com, and sign up for my newsletter. It's free, so alanmckay.com, and you'll have access to free guides, my podcast where I interview a lot of industry leaders such as VFX supervisors at ILM, Weta, and many other leading studios, as well as feature film directors and even game studios like id Software and Epic, as well as doing roundtables with a lot of visual effects teams, specifically around movies that they've worked on and a lot of other cool information like that, as well as, of course, free email templates, masterclasses, and other high-value training. So again, almackay.com and sign up for my free newsletter. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you. What key takeaways did you get from this episode? Leave a comment and let me know. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll make sure to respond. Okay, thanks for watching.